Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast. Today we will be discussing the Conference of Grand Masters.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our opinions and thoughts are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions, either here on YouTube or on our Facebook page. We'd also appreciate a thumbs up and especially any comments on our videos.
To the Working Tools Masonic Podcast, where we'll be discussing the Conference of Grand Masters. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of a lodge here in the Evergreen state of Washington. And we have with us today our usual hosts, David Colbeth, also from Washington, and Stephen Chung from the province of British Columbia and the Grand Lodge of BC in the Yukon. And a special guest today, we have Most Worshipful Brother Jim Mendoza, who's the past Grand Master of Masons in Washington, and is also a renowned Mason at large within the state of Washington. So I hear he was given that title last night.
Yeah, that's the last thing. I need another title.
Well, thanks for being on our show. We appreciate you being here, Jim.
My pleasure.
So the reason that we got to talking about the Conference of Grand Masters is that between David and I lies the city of Seattle, where it will be hosted in a short period of time. So Jim, you're heading up those efforts from what I understand?
That is correct. When I was Grand Master back in 2017, we were at the conference that was being held in Omaha, and we had put in a bid to be the host in 2021. Our competitor was Montreal, and I was prepared to step aside because who wouldn't want to go to Montreal? Then I realized who wants to go to Montreal in February. So
as the lone Canadian smiles.
So we ended up winning the bid, which is kind of interesting.
It was to be fair, it was in Alaska in February, so you know.
No, that's when Grand Lodge holds it there. That's the Alaska Grand Lodge, and that's a whole nother podcast, by the way. You guys need to have because there's an interesting story about that. But in any event, we put in our bid. We had put in a bid, and the ironic part of it is that at the time I was chairman of the conference time and place committee, and that's the committee that chooses where the Conference of Grand Masters goes. And so I recused myself from the discussions, and basically the way it would work was this: I appointed someone to be my co-chair, and we decided that if Montreal got it, I would make the presentation to congratulate Montreal. And if Washington got it, then my co-chair, Most Worshipful Brother Stan Hudson, my counterpart in Florida, would make the announcement. Well, when I was allowed back into the deliberation room, Stan greeted me with the comment, quote, "I'm making the report." And so Stan took the podium in front of the delegate body and announced that Washington had been, specifically Seattle, Washington, had been chosen the host for the 2021, and we've been basically in plans since 2017 to make this happen.
That's a good long time horizon. At least you have some time to get a good spot and figure some things out before they show up.
Well, you have to. Part of the bid is you have to pick the spot then, and it's going to be at the Westin Hotel in downtown. And but the big thing was doing a lot of fact finding. So that involved me talking to the previous Grand Lodges, at least in my tenure as elected Grand Lodge officer, that had previously hosted. So I had talked with Baltimore, British Columbia, Madison, Wisconsin, Omaha, Nebraska, and then subsequently I've also talked with the folks at Indianapolis, and of course we just got back from Louisville, Kentucky. So I've been doing a lot of fact finding, find out what works, what doesn't work. Spent the last year and a half gathering volunteers, hawking coins and pins to kind of help with the cost of the whole thing. Because the general idea is, yes, it will cost some money, but the general idea is for it to be revenue neutral. Nobody wants a Grand Lodge to go into debt to sponsor this event, though it is quite the undertaking. And if you're not planned right, if you're not laying everything out properly, if you're not negotiating well, then yeah, you could cost your Grand Lodge some money, and that's the last thing we want to do with this particular program, because there's some valuable things that happen at the conference.
So technically, this is the Conference of Grand Masters of North America, right? Who all comes to this? You just named a half dozen states. Is it just the U.S. and Canada, or is it?
Well, yes, you're right. It said the Conference of Grand Masters in North America. So yes, it is the United States. It is the Canadian provinces. Additionally, Mexico. So that's the defined North American area. Then, of course, we also pick up several Grand Lodges from the Caribbean, some from South America. For the past several years, we've had Grand Lodges. We've had the Grand Lodges from Bulgaria come to this event. There was a Grand Lodge from Liechtenstein that came, that was seeking recognition, and that's a fun story. And then, of course, when we host in Seattle, we hope to have a fairly nice contingent from the Far East.
In a conference of Grand Lodges, I mean, they already decide what's going on in their world. What's the conference for?
The conference basically is to gather men together, gather these Grand Lodges together for the purposes of best practices of what's working. Grand Masters have been meeting together, since the 1700s in the United States, because everyone has concerns. What's happening in your neck of the woods? What's happening over there? What's working over there? What's not working over there? If it's not working, do you have an idea of how it can be fixed? Now over there, if it's working, what are your best practices? And something incredible happens there, because sometimes these best practices or best ideas that are happening in other Grand Lodges get adopted, by other Grand Lodges. A perfect example is the Bikes for Books program that has kind of permeated, that has become a big deal in Washington. Well, that was a discussion topic in that was there, and I believe it came out of the Grand Lodge of Montana. And again, this is an idea that probably wouldn't have gotten any germination in Washington were it not for the fact that a bunch of Grand Masters were in a room and they started talking about it. The 6 Steps program, as another example, that many Grand Lodges have begun to adopt as a way of better assessing a potential candidate's desires to be a member of the fraternity. That got its genesis in the Conference of Grand Masters. The Masonic Service Association got its genesis at the Conference of Grand Masters, as has done the old CHIP program, the Masonic Model Student Foundation, and of course the one popular one that's always out there is the Commission on Recognition, where people come to the table and say, hey, we're a brand spanking new Grand Lodge, we'd like to be recognized, and maybe it merits recognition, maybe it doesn't, and those are all things that come out of there. On the surface it looks like a bunch of type A personalities getting locked in a room and seeing who comes out as the number one. But what really happens is that you have this great interchange of ideas. And when you have that interchange of ideas, when we start talking, it's amazing. It's amazing what happens. Plus you get to interface with some of the greatest Masonic minds that are out there. Thomas Jackson, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, actually past Grand Secretary. He was never Grand Master. He could have been, but he was always Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Is arguably the most learned man about international Freemasonry. And to sit down and talk to him within 5 minutes, you know that this man's an expert, and he brings such a measured and knowledgeable and depth of knowledge that very, very few people have. Brent Morris was there recently at this one. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that's where the great idea of the 6-step program was from the Conference of Grand Masters. That was I started that here back in 2012, and it was instituted by our Grand Lodge, and maybe that's where they got it from. great program. So I can see how that conference is very valuable for sharing the best practices. I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
And like you said, Jim, you get to meet people that you wouldn't have met before. I remember I was fortunate to go to the Vancouver one that we had a few years ago. And I sat down on a couch next to a young man. He was not feeling good. And we got to chatting, and his name was Sean Martin. He was the youngest master of Vancouver 1 and that I know of in history. I think he was the youngest in history, or at least one of the youngest for sure. Very young man, sharp young kid. And really got to know him, and we're friends on Facebook. And now, and since then, of course, he's passed his Series 7 and got married and all kinds of stuff now. I think he might even have kids, but
yeah, he does. I think they're expecting a second. But no, he's
people you wouldn't even that's what's fun about Masonry in general and different organizations, that you wouldn't meet people that you would normally meet in Conference of Grand Masters. You meet people from around the world you would never meet.
Yeah, you do meet the people, but the most important thing that you get is if you're paying, even if you're casually paying attention, you pick up one new idea. Sure. And it's amazing. It's amazing how that idea can germinate and become something. Can become something very huge, like a Bikes for Books program, like a Six Steps, or on a grander scale, like the Masonic Service Organization, the Masonic Service Association. It's the whole line. We do better when we work together. And we do better when we share best practices, and it's important to share that. Like we've brought to the table the concept of long range planning, and actually it's interesting because we got that from the Conference of Grand Masters, and the two delegates at the time from Washington who attended, Bob Van Zee and Jimmy Reed, at the time senior and junior Grand Warden respectively, began the process of long range planning. The idea of taking a Grand Master's trim and understanding that stuff does not necessarily begin and end in your year. That it's okay to put forth an idea and have it continue forward. You don't have to accomplish everything in the year. Some things shouldn't be condensed in 1 year. So to be able to have that, and then of course we've been able to pay it back forward. So that's exciting. And then there's simple ideas like Doug Tucker started the photography committee. Guess what? You're seeing more and more Grand Lodges with people running around with cameras because great stuff is happening and nobody takes the time to take a picture of it. And as a result, maybe you have somebody who had an old Polaroid, or maybe somebody who had an old 35 millimeter, and do they have a copy of the film? Now we have pictures everywhere. It's really beautiful to see. And it serves as a memory, but it also serves as, for lack of a better term, a trigger point to go, oh, wait a second, we did that. Let's find out more about it. So I just love the interchange. I just love the interchange that happens at the Conference of Grand Masters.
So is there a committee, Jim, that from the Conference of Grand Masters that handles the sessions and the actual event itself, and you're just the site and the infrastructure, or how does that, or do you handle everything?
No. So basically, let's kind of break it down a little bit. The conference itself has an executive secretary, and that's Michael DeWolf, who's the current Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin and past Grand Master of that jurisdiction. He's the executive secretary. He's kind of the business manager. He makes things. He makes sure that contracts are negotiated. That the hotels are right, all that good stuff. Because that's the thing. We put them a bid. We say, okay, this is where we're going. The brethren decide, the delegates decide, okay, that's where we're going to go, and then Mike goes to work. Now, what about what happens at the conference? Well, there's a planning committee. And in previous years, we've had Grand Masters from Washington serve as members of that planning committee. As an example, Gail Kenny was on the planning committee when he was Grand Master. Don Monks was on the planning committee. He was the vice chair. Jim Kendall was on the planning committee as president, and currently Chris Kaufman will be on the planning committee next year for this year. The idea of the planning committee is they set the curriculum, the things that will will be discussed. So like, for example, at this particular Grand Lodge, this particular conference, a couple topics that stood out to me. There was they brought in a PhD from one of the local colleges to talk about handling difficult issues, which was a fascinating thing. Brent Morris, who is a Mason of some reputation in the Scottish Rite, he talked about he talked about statistical trends in Freemasonry, because more and more people are getting data driven, and so that was a topic that he had. There's a ladies program that exists too, because you can't have, in the case of the most recent conference, 945 men and not think at least one wife is going to show up, right? No, they had a really great ladies program for them as well. So that's the third thing. Then you have a time and place committee. They're the people who decide where the conferences are going to be in the future. For example, the conference in 2024 was awarded to Guadalajara, Mexico. So if anybody's looking to go to Guadalajara in 2024, guess what? Start planning now. So that's the time and place committee there. And then of course there's the host committee, which I will be chairing, and the host committee is designed to basically create the environment that will have a positive that will be positive for the conference. So that includes things like tours. Of course, because you can't just invite people over and just lock them in a hotel room, especially a city as beautiful as Seattle. So there will be tours. There'll be a tour for the men. There'll be a tour for the ladies as well. There's also a Grand Secretary's Planning Committee that basically plans the Grand Secretary's stuff. The Grand Secretary, the issues that are important for Grand Secretaries. When David Owen in 2016, I believe, was chairman of the Grand Secretary's team, his focus was technology, talking about the importance of technology in better managing lodges and grand lodges. So you have this group. My group, like I said, the host committee is, we're there to make sure that everything happens positively for everyone, and even down to the menu choices. We want to make sure that people enjoy the food. Because, by the way, funny thing, we were in Louisville, and one of the banquets ran out of chicken. I want you to think about that. We in Kentucky, we ran out of chicken.
The colonel wasn't happy.
I found that humorous. We did not, however, run out of bourbon. I will say that we didn't run out of bourbon. I think that's impossible.
How often do you have to meet? Do you have obviously you have virtual meetings because you're probably not all going to get together. Do you meet monthly or quarterly, or how often do you meet?
We were meeting, if I tracked it, about every other month. Let's back up. As soon as it was awarded, it was me working with the Grand Secretary to start laying the foundations, getting them all in place. And then I started putting together, okay, what are the needs that I feel we're going to have to ensure, again, a positive experience. So first things first, let's take it from the very beginning. People are going to come to the airport. All right, so we need to have an airport team. We need to make people greet people at the airport, because again, stranger in a strange land, we want to make sure everybody's doing okay. Now we have to get them from SeaTac to downtown. That's coordinated bus effort. We have to have that. Now they've hit the hotel. Again, stranger in a strange land. We have a concierge team. They're there to make sure that everyone understands where they get a lay of the land, help them out with mapping and so forth like that. And then when people go on tours, they're going to go on group tours, but maybe they want to go on individual tours. Again, the stranger in a strange land thing. We have a docent team to help them move about. Now we have some Grand Lodge resources that are also available to folks. We have, as you know, David, we have a medical response team. They'll be there. Rick McGann and the photography team will be there to archive the entire event. And then, of course, now you're looking for other things like transportation. Yeah, we can put them in a cab if we need to, but guess what? We have the benefit of a Fifi Shrine, who has 4 large passenger vans. They're going to serve as a Masonic Uber for us. So it's getting all those things in place to make sure they have a positive experience. Now, this is going to take about 200 volunteers, I figure. And I need to take care of those volunteers. So we have a volunteer support team. And then, of course, people need to unwind. So we have a hospitality team to help out with that.
Mhm.
Again, the whole thing, the whole thing is to make sure that everybody has a positive experience. And in return, what the volunteers are going to get is they're going to get a chance to duck in and listen to some of the sessions, to hear some of the speakers. 2 years ago, we had illustrious brother Sammy Davis, who was a Medal of Honor recipient, and we got to hear his story.
Oh, Jim, we got muted for some reason there, but
Somebody tried to call in on me. You heard me mention that. I don't know if anybody remembers what he had to say, but everyone sure as heck remembered him playing Shenandoah on his microphone, on his harmonica, and that was incredibly sweet. Chris Hodap, a renowned author, is of Masonic Note, is typically there, and he's happy to share stuff. We've actually, and I'm pretty proud of this one. We're kind of going a little bit off the out of the box, if you will, for the speaker we're bringing in. We're bringing in Owen Shea from the Grand Lodge of Hawaii to be our keynote speaker. And I think people are going to, number one, be stunned, but number two, be incredibly pleased that at the end of the day, at the choice of Owen. Owen is the past Grand Orator for the Grand Lodge of Hawaii, past Master of Honolulu Lodge. And additionally, he is the N7 lead for the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. So
yeah, I was looking back in our communications, and you had sent a link for his TEDx YouTube video, so I watched that earlier today.
Amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, it was, and he was at. I was fortunate to be at the Lodge Leadership Retreat where he spoke as well.
Yeah, and amazing. And the thing is, there's a lot of things people know. Like, for example, he's a virtuoso pianist. If you can go to YouTube, type in Owen Shea on YouTube, and you'll see him do this incredible journey mashup, which is like, really? And I don't think he's even 40. So it's he's currently working on his PhD on the politics of weather, because he's a meteorologist. So yeah, it's
weather.
Yep. Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, he got his undergraduate degree from Cornell, then went to University of Oklahoma to get his master's degree because he wanted to chase storms. And now he's living in Hawaii as the N7 lead for the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. Amazing young man. So we're looking forward to this to hosting this event in Seattle because number one, Seattle's my hometown. I love showing the city off. But number two, I'd love to be able to show people from all over the world how we in the great state of Washington celebrate our Freemasonry. I think I'm not going to say that we celebrate it any better, but obviously everybody has a different way that they manifest their Freemasonry, and I think they're going to see something really special from the Seattle team. And I'm really looking forward to playing a small role in making that happen.
That's pretty cool. They tried to convince me to jump on a committee and convince a bunch of guys in the Okanagan to host Grand Lodge, and that would have made me responsible for all those committees that you listed off of there. And I just without a whole bunch of guys standing behind me saying, "Yeah, I'll give you some help," couldn't do it.
It's funny when I put the word out. Number one, there are some people that I knew that I wanted on the team. For example, for the airport team, I know I needed somebody who worked at the airport. Well, I didn't know a brother who worked at the airport, but I knew a brother's lady who did. And so she became on board. I needed somebody in the city of Seattle who knew Seattle and knew it well, and who was local, who was there. Now, the person who's going to help me, who's leading that group, is not a Mason, but she's an Eastern Star, and she just happens to be a longtime friend of mine, almost going now on 40 years, and she happens to work for King County, which is where Seattle sits. So guess what? She's on the team. And there's the thing is, and Stephen, maybe you're going to be given the opportunity to do this again. Nothing has to fall 100% on your shoulders. You just need to find some people. And it's amazing what happens. That when the call goes out, people are going to be there for you.
It always drops back to the chairman of the committee. Always, right? So, yeah, I'll be helpful, and I'll work in the background for the guy who puts his name forward.
Well, you know something. You can always come down to Seattle and give us a hand.
As Jim will testify from our visit with the Grand Master up in District 2, the deputy gets credit for everything. So that's
yes, he does. He does get credit for everything.
It's amazing how much.
By the way,
that was
fun. Yeah, you got I believe you got credit for discovering the Titanic. So.
It's, I don't even know what to say. Rich honor is clustered about my throne here. So on that note, we're about running out of time for this episode of the Working Tools podcast. So I would like to say thank you to Jim for being with us today. And on behalf of David and myself, we hope to see you again soon.